Mr. Secretary, welcome back. You left this committee, took on your new role at the same time I joined this committee, and it's been a rather momentous time in history. I think most Americans would really like to concentrate on the enormous domestic challenges, but reality is pretty well smacking us all in the face, and we have, like Senator Risch, I don't envy you or the President's task having to grapple with these enormous challenges, kind of evidenced by this hearing. I'd like to concentrate on what I think is right now the most pressing of all these problems, and it really is going back to Ukraine and our relationship with Russia. I was part of the bipartisan delegation that was there the day before they took the vote in Crimea, and certainly as we were meeting with Prime Minister Yatsenyuk, you could see the stress in his face. It was pretty sobering. I think we could also sense the disappointment that the United States wasn't even willing to offer small arms and ammunition to support the courageous people of Ukraine. In response to my question, I was asking, well, what can we do? What can we do to support Ukraine? And Prime Minister Yatsenyuk, first of all, made the statement that Vladimir Putin will not respond to words. He only responds to action. Now, in your testimony here, you say you've made it clear about our deep concerns that we will not hesitate to use 21st century tools. I just want to ask, what are we going to do? What actions are we going to take to change the calculus of Vladimir Putin, who will only respond to action? What are we going to do to make the price high for Vladimir Putin if he continues the provocations you're saying that's contrived crisis, contrived pretext? I mean, but bottom line, the reason we heard from this administration they weren't willing to provide arms is we thought it would create a provocation. Well, he doesn't need a provocation. What Vladimir Putin needs is deterrence. What are we going to do to deter Vladimir Putin from going further in Ukraine?
Well, we're doing it. I mean, look, we are.
Just meant they mocked at our last set of sanctions.
I beg your pardon?
They mocked.
No,
our last set of sanctions.
The last set were not mocked. The first round met with some, because I think people's expectations were higher. But look, Senator, you know this in dealing with human nature and with problems that you want to aim before you shoot. And I think it's clear that we have huge capacity to have an impact. They're not incapable of analyzing America's capacity here with respect to banking and finance and movement of people and so forth. So what we wanted to do initially was make it clear there's going to be action. And the Europeans have marched together with us, in partnership here, in unanimous form. And that has a profound impact, because Europe does a lot more business with Russia than we do.
But Vladimir Putin is, as you're saying, he is creating this provocation.
Well, but
they are moving into cities in Ukraine.
The question
he's setting up the exact same circumstances as he did in Georgia and as he did in Crimea.
Could be, but he could also not be. And I don't have the answer to exactly what step he's going to take when. What I do know is that we are sending a signal today of the clarity of our intention to use whatever sanction is necessary if they continue. Now, that's clear, and that's taking full aim. And the question is, will that have an impact or won't it? I think, given the fact that yesterday, at their initiation, they called us to suggest that it was important to have a meeting to try to deal with this. I'm not going to place any stock in a meeting. I'm not going to place it on words. It's got to be actions. But you got to sit down and at least find out.
Well, and of course, that's my point. What actions? The former governor of your state, Governor Romney, was pretty well mocked by this president when he said that Russia was America's greatest geopolitical foe. He wrote an interesting column. I just want to read part of it. Why across the world are Americans' hands so tied, which kind of seems like we are? A large part of the answer is our leaders' terrible timing. In virtually every foreign affairs crisis we have faced these past 5 years, there was a point when America had good choices and good options. There was a juncture when America had the potential to influence event, but we failed to act at the propitious moment. The moment having passed, we were left without acceptable options. And he went on to say, it is hard to name even a single country that has more respect and admiration for America today than when President Obama took office. And now Russia's in Ukraine. If you disagree with that, can you name a country that has greater respect for America 5 years later?
I could name lots of countries that have greater respect for us as we are attempting to move people out of Guantanamo, as we end a war in Iraq, as we are beginning to draw down in Afghanistan, as we stand up for human rights, as we are the single greatest supporter of humanitarian effort in Syria, as we do countless things, as we save 5 million kids' lives in Africa with our program on AIDS. There are many things that people admire about what we're doing. Are there problems? Sure, there are problems. In different parts of the world, there's greater sectarianism, greater religious extremism, greater radical Islam presence in various places. You're going to dump all of that on the United States of America? Because, I mean, please, this is a complicated world, my friend. And the fact is, the United States, I think, is doing an amazing amount with some handicaps, I might add. You know, a budget that is getting smaller, not bigger. Having to hold back on what we're doing in certain countries, having to cut in certain places what we've been doing to try to help people educate or change or provide health care or do some of the things we do. So I think you need to look carefully at, you know, this kind of talk about, you know, the action that produces the differential. President Putin didn't decide to do what he did in Crimea because of something the United States did or didn't do. He decided to do it because he could and it was in his interest. And again... And
he didn't feel he'd pay a price. Again, trust me, I totally blame Vladimir Putin. If there's further bloodshed, it's because of Vladimir Putin. But we have to deter.
You have to measure price in certain ways. Is he paying a price? His oligarchs are not able to travel to some of their, you know, various places. They're losing money. Their ruble has gone down 7%. There's an impact in Europe. I think he's had a massive change in public opinion in Ukraine. People who once felt better about Russia don't today. He's united many Ukrainians, even those who are Russian-speaking, against Russia.
But he's still sending in agents under the pretext for further action. He's not been deterred.
Yes, he is. No, he hasn't stopped doing that. That is accurate. But there are, you know, I think questions about legitimate questions before you pull the trigger that need to be answered about what they may or may not be willing to do in the next days. They're willing to meet with Europe, with Ukrainians. That's a step forward. They're willing to sit with the interim government of Ukraine, with Europe, with the United States, in an effort to sort of plot a road ahead. And we have made it clear the imperative to de-escalate, the imperative to demobilize, the imperative to move troops. After my meeting in Paris, they did announce the drawback of one particular battalion. Not enough yet, not what we are obviously looking for, but a first signal. And the question now is, can some of their other legitimate interests be met in a way that is appropriate, which doesn't invite illegitimate interests to also be mixed into the batch? And that's the key. I don't know the answer to that question yet, and I don't think we will until we meet. But I do think that given the serious implication of the sector sanctions, we owe it to ourselves and to everybody to exhaust the possible remedies that the diplomatic process might provide. We haven't done that yet, and we're going to find out. Obviously, yesterday was a step backwards, no question about it. And we've spoken out loudly and clearly as a consequence of it and made clear what our determination is.
Thank you. America must face reality, and hope's not a strategy. Thanks.
Let me